The Alps, endless roads carved into stone, calling for speed and thrill. Twisting passes, towering peaks, the ultimate playground for a machine with soul. But this machine is not ready. Not yet. Before it can scream through these mountains, it must be finished. Forged from ancient steel, built by hand, stripped to the bone, every bolt cut and weld, honed with passion. Raw, relentless, alive. This is the BMW EVO. Sorry, that was me throwing up in my mouth a little bit. That was AI trying to write an authentic intro for my video. I apologise for that, and I think script writing is safe for now. Enjoy the episode. Okay, let's start where we left off from the last episode. We had finished off taking the measurements for the reduction of both sides of the prop shaft. We spent a long time getting the calculations hopefully right. The next thing to focus on are the drive shafts. I need to combine the M3 ones with the Z4 ones. At the end of the last episode, I did try removing the M3 ones from the hubs. However, I struggled to get them out. I've left them for a few days now with some spray in them, so hopefully they will have freed up. We can get those out. And I also have progress on the Z4 one, where I think it was so seized that I couldn't get it apart. We may be in luck. After dousing it down with some spray and going over it with a drill and wire brush, it's actually starting to clean up. So I think we may be able to get this off without damaging it. Therefore, I won't need to buy a second-hand shaft and hub. I have ordered the right size socket, so until that comes, I won't know if this restoration project is going to work as far as getting this apart, but we can only hope. I start on one of the M3 hub assemblies. I use a wooden stake and a hammer to hit the end of the drive shaft. The reason I'm doing this is I don't want to have metal and metal contact in case I mushroom the head of the shaft. The likelihood of me using that part is low, but still, I don't want to cause any damage. It still looks as though it's completely seized, so I turn it upside down, then gently hit around the hub assembly to hopefully crack off any rust that's on the inside. Then I go back to try and punch it out with the wood and the hammer, but I have no luck. I then decide I need a bit more swinging power. I go and upgrade the hammer to a mini sledge, and I also swap out the piece of wood. As you can see, I'm still not having any joy. What else can we try? I've had a go at this one as well, and it still won't come apart. It's pretty good for making kindling, but I can't get the shaft through the hub. I think I will use some more of this and then spray the backside. I'll put them upside down and spray them with some more spray. I decide to get some penetrating oil on the back side of the joints. Hopefully it can seep down into any gaps, destroying the rust. I really could do with getting these apart. Next, I'm going to take the Z4 assembly outside and we'll try and get this cleaned up the best we can. After giving it some more spray to keep the dust down, I go at it with a wire brush on my drill. Every so often I will swap directions with the brush to help with the abrasion. I have a good feeling that this will clean up. I am shocked at how well it is cleaning up, so I'm going to let it soak again and then we'll try and get some more rust off. While I wait for that to do its thing, and also these two hub assemblies to do their thing, I have sprayed a bit more on there just now. We can look at getting the lower arms, so the spring platforms, onto the Z4 subframe, and also any other bits that aren't completely rusted. This steering rack cannot go back on the car until I've finalised the engine mounts. I need to cap them somehow from the top, and this is going to be in the way if I reinstall it. So that can just sit there for now. I'm guessing that's the offside, and that's the... no, wrong. Yeah, right. That's the near side. Because the angle these come off there, you see the mount for the anti-roll bar is parallel to the car. If it was that one, it would be completely twisted offset. You see, that's the main difference. Those indicators there. Anyway, let's get this on the car. It's going to be super hard to fit the nut back on this. Never guess what. There's a diff. Might even be in the way of getting this bolted. Oh, that's gonna go. It will go. I hit it hard enough. There we go. Boom. I'm not going to bolt it on fully, as just having the bolt threaded through is fine for testing. It's good to get this installed now, because when I come to start modifying and reinforcing the subframe that I've already started on, I know the clearance I'll have around all the parts, so I can make reference before I take this back off to see where I can actually get some strengthening plates on this piece. As more and more parts are getting put on this car, things are starting to fall into place. Needless to say, it's a good idea to get everything dry fitted before final assembly. There is still a lot of cleaning up work to do under the car, plus the rest of the fabrication for the diff. Once we get these drive shafts aligned, we should be fairly home free. Yep, there's no way I'm going to get this arm on the near side without lowering the differential with the jack. So I think I'm going to carry on with trying to get the drive shafts free before I get this piece off. After I'd left it to soak for a bit, it was round 2 with the drill and the brush. It's starting to clean up well. Time will tell with this one. After leaving the M3 hub and drive shaft assemblies overnight to soak in the oil, I try again with a hammer. This time the sledge still isn't making any difference. We need to find a way of getting these out. I guess I'll try the other one. These are proving to be very stubborn. I've never experienced any being quite so tight. Perhaps they've been on for a long time. They ain't budging. One day later, what do you reckon the odds are on them freeing up now? Yet another day bites the dust. Surely they're going to come apart now. No, they're not going anywhere. What is going on? Why won't this budge? I'm not quite sure what to suggest other than give it a bit more soaking time. Maybe find a bigger hammer. I do have the appropriate size socket now for the Z4 hubs. Next I'm going to try and get these apart. Now with the Z4 assemblies being a bit smaller, surely they're not going to be as hard to get apart as the M3 ones. I need to get the socket installed nice and square. I can't afford to round this nut off, otherwise it's going to be a nightmare. Quite tight then. I didn't have it on film, but I just cracked it off and it was like a gunshot. It was a hell of a crack. But haven't broken anything. So that's going to come off, which is good. The other question is, are we going to have the same issue getting the drive shaft out of the hub? Hopefully not. I now move on to the other Z4 hub. I want to see if the socket I bought will actually tap onto the rusty nut and actually potentially clean it a bit. It turned out it barely went on at all. We could have an issue here. I think I'm going to have to clean this up a bit more. Back on the Z4 one, we managed to crack the nut off. Now let's see if the drive shaft will come out. Sounds pretty solid to me. Well, that answers that then. We now have 3 stuck drive shafts. While that one soaks in some spray, I go on to the other one and see if I can clean this nut up anymore. I am resorting to drilling the nut off the end of the drive shaft. It's not the situation I wanted to be in, but at this stage, I don't really have much choice if I want to try and save these parts. I need to get the position of the drill bit perfectly placed. I need to drill it down the center of the side wall of the nut without damaging either the hub or the shaft itself. These parts I potentially want to use. If I drill it out to a certain point, and I may be able to just use a chisel, either split the nut around the outside of the shaft or actually just turn it and start releasing the nut by unwinding it with a chisel. I think we're getting close now. I have almost reduced the amount of material I need to. Now it's just a combination of using the drill here and there and then trying to chisel the gap so I can actually free it up and take the pressure off the nut. I need to be careful now not to cause any unwanted damage. We've got movement on the nut. The question is now is how much damage have I done to it? Thankfully the nut is starting to undo itself around the threads quite nicely. That means I probably haven't done much damage to the threads themselves on the drive shaft. Please let it be usable. Save me a few £100 at least, potentially. Oh yes! That's pretty good. See where I drilled it out? No damage. That's a stroke of luck. Now it's just a case of getting the 4 stuck drive shafts out of the hubs in both the 2 from the M3 and 2 from this Z4. Give them a good soaking, and then tomorrow we'll go for another session with the sledgehammer. I've ended up ordering a hub puller for these parts. Both the Z4 bits and the M3 hub and drive shafts, they're not coming apart. I've had a good session with a sledgehammer again and no movement at all, so I'm just not going to damage anything. I'm going to wait until I get the puller and then we should be able to get them off easily. While I wait for the kit, I can do a bit more on the rear end. I can put the arm on like this on the other side. I'll get the jack round and we'll lower the diff down. Once I've done that, I can actually do some modifications to the lower arms at the front, as I need to modify them slightly, I think, to fit properly with the extra spacing. As you know, we've done some mods to the front subframe with the engine mounts. It's spaced down a bit, so I need to just put those up probably towards the front of the car, the lollipop bushes, so we might have to modify the lower arm a bit. I'm hoping I can just take the rear mount out and it'll be enough to lower the back of the diff down and get enough clearance. I do some Pilates until the jack is high enough to support the differential. Then I go about removing the bolts in the back of the diff in order to free it up enough to get the bolt out. I managed to twist it down a bit more and I think it could be just enough to go in. There's only one way to find out. Perhaps I was a bit too optimistic. I could not get the bolt that goes through the arm straight enough to reach through the other side. It looks like we need to disassemble the diff a bit more. There we go. Plenty of clearance now. After removing one of the 2 bolts in the front of the diff housing, I managed to get the bolt all the way through. I can leave that in there now until we get the assembly on for test fitting. I can now put the bolts back in that I took out. I'm not going to go crazy at the moment getting everything back together, as I've noticed the lower arm will have the same issue. We're going to have contact on the differential when it comes to bolting it together. So I'm going to wait until that hub assembly is all ready to go back on, so we can just put it on in a wanner and it'll just be a lot easier that way. Moving back onto the front, I'm going to take these lower arms off and hopefully modify them so they fit better. Firstly, I need to support the engine, so when I take the bolts out, the tacks on the mods to the subframe don't just fall to the ground. So safety first. Because of the location of the mounts on either side of the engine, they are situated further towards the back of the car, so they're not directly over the mounting points for the subframe. For this reason, I need to support the engine. With it secure, I can now take off the lower arm. We need to come up with a good solution for this part. We need to make sure there's good clearance from the modified subframe in order to avoid any contact between the parts on final assembly. There are a few setup options for these lower arms. Firstly, I definitely want to upgrade the bushes to polyurethane ones. One thing I can't do is change the angle or the position of the bottom ball joint that goes into the hub assembly, because that will change the caster on the car. It will affect the steering geometry quite a bit, so that has to stay as it is. So whatever modifications I do up here, I have to make sure it's not going to move in relation to that side. I'm going to figure out the best plan for these arms and then I will let you know. I have now made a plan for the lower arms. I have ordered some fairly cheap but polyurethane upgraded bushes for the back of the arm, complete with the housing. So the old one I can just simply cut off. Then I'll show you how I'm going to modify the arm itself to reposition this bush slightly lower down the arm. And then I can show you what I'm going to do with the plates. I have some spaces I can make out of this aluminium sheet, and I'll probably use either 1 or 2 in regards to thickness, and then they're going to be basically sandwiched between the chassis or the modified subframe and the arm itself, like so. I will start by making the template for these spacers. I'm going to make 4 just in case I need to use 2 for either side. Now's a good time to do this before I pull the bushes off the arms. While they're held in place, they're easy to work on. After placing the cardboard on the mount and then flipping it over, I can trace around the outside shape of that aluminium piece. We're not going to worry about marking the center holes for now too much. We'll do that at the end. Once I mark out the shape, I can trim them and then test them on the arm. Normally when you trace around a shape, it's always slightly oversized because of the gap between the end of the pen and the item that you're tracing. This means it just needs a little trim to get it perfect. Once I'm happy with the shape, I then make another one, but this time I trace out half, fold it over and then mark it out again. By doing this, I get a perfect mirror image and it's completely symmetrical. Once I've done that, it looks good, I'm happy with that. I can move on to tracing it on to the aluminium plates. I think I only have enough metal to make 4 of these. This means I can't make any mistakes when cutting it out, and it's already a challenge to get them fitted on. Now it's time to move on to the bushes themselves. The easiest way to remove these traditionally is with a bench press. I don't have one of these, so I simply cut down the middle of them. This should relieve the tension enough for me to be able to remove them with a hammer. I quickly find out that these bushes are filled with fluid. To be honest, I wasn't expecting that, and they really made a mess of my brick. Regardless, I carry on taking material off until it becomes free enough for me to remove it. Exactly the same process on the other arm. This one managed to pull itself out from the center, so it came off in 2 pieces. You can see this one, it took a bit of damage on the end of the arm. I will have to get the file for this to clean it up. With the bushes removed from the lower arm, I can now look at how I'm going to modify this. You can see the end is quite a unique profile. It's like a hexagon shape, but each plane is slightly different. And there's a weird kind of embossed bit on the end there. I don't know if you can see it on the camera. But what I need to do is carry on with a profile on each section, only probably about 10 mil or so. So I'll carefully work it with the angle grinder on both pieces, and then when we get the new poly bushes, we can see how they fit. I work my way along each angle, making sure not to take too much material off. I stop regularly to look down the end of the arm. I'd rather take too little off at this point than too much. After stopping at the point where I think it's appropriate, I just go over it quickly with the file. I've taken the bulk of the material off I need to with the grinder. The rest I think I can do with a file. However, I do want to wait until I get the upgraded bushes to see exactly how they're going to fit on here. So I don't want to basically don't want to take too much material off, because that will come to bite me if I do. So we'll just have to wait on this job and move on to something else. I do need to figure out how I'm going to finish off these engine mounts. I need to come up with a way of getting them to stay seated in the base and the platform I've made. Also, I need to stop the polyurethane bush from twisting around on itself, because I said before, the stud in the polyurethane bush is actually cammed, so it's set off to one side. If the engine decides to move, it could actually work its way in the engine bay to one side or the other, which obviously would be a big problem. So as the clearances are so fine, that's the main issue on the exhaust, especially to the chassis leg, so I can't afford any movement of this F65. Let me think of a way, I'll come up with some ideas and then I'll tell you all about them. I now have a plan which I will explain. Before I do anything, I need to check the engine is still perfectly centered. Importantly, I need to make sure the headers have equal clearance either side between the chassis leg. This is a really good indicator that the engine is central. Once I've done that, with a rag, I just need to clean off the top of the engine mounts and the plate that surrounds it. With it dusted off, I can now make 2 reference marks. This is going to be reference to the orientation of the mount that is sat in the subframe. I make 2 marks side by side so there's no confusion. Then I work my pen around the base of the engine bracket that sat on top of the mount itself. This indicates exactly where it sits and what area of the mount is covered by the bracket. I'll explain in a minute. I move on to the near side and do exactly the same thing. You see the 2 marks referencing the orientation and then the line around the bracket. I have made the marks on both of the engine mounts. I now need to tell you exactly what my plan is to stop these mounts from pulling up out of the subframe. I need to take the subframe off. To show you that, it'd be a lot easier, so that's the next thing I need to do. It's a good opportunity now while the engine is supported at the back from the gearbox mounts that's still on the car, and conveniently I already have the jack in place, so I'll lift it up a bit more and then we can take the subframe off the car. I take a bit more stress off the subframe by lifting the engine up. Then I can start doing the 4 bolts that hold the subframe to the underside of the car. Remember, I've already removed the bolts that hold the extended piece on. I've already welded on. I did that when I removed the lower arms. Once I'm happy it's safe to lower the assembly, I buzz the remaining bolts out and pull it off. So here you see the marks that I've made while it was on the car. These are now my reference marks. I'm essentially going to make 2 brackets that bolt to the top of the subframe. It will do 2 jobs essentially. Number 1, it will clamp the mount down to the subframe tight, preventing the engine from rocking. And number 2, there will be a small stud that goes into the mount on the sidewall to stop it from twisting round. That's the theory anyway. At the moment, it's just a design in my head which I have to transfer to cardboard. Luckily for me, the orientation of the mounts on either side are pretty similar, so I can probably use the templates and just duplicate them to use them on both sides. These should be simple to get welded on in the right place, as I can tack it all on snug with the mount in place, pull the brackets out and then weld them up, whilst being able to test fit them easily on the subframe. And it should end up looking something like that. With all of the cardboard templates cut out and ready to go, I can trace them out onto some metal. For the smaller bits, I found some odd offcuts. I think that was a part of the version 1 of the rear differential housing. Either way, we can use it for this job now. Once I had used what I could from the scrap pile, I got a fresh sheet of 2mm steel out. Then I proceeded to trace out the remaining shapes. As soon as that was done, I can start cutting them out. Unfortunately for me, I have 4 awkward shapes to cut out, essentially 4 C shapes. Either way, it involves a lot of cutting out of the center, making lots of lines, trying to hash them together, until eventually I'll get enough material off, I can get a grinding disc on, then I can smooth it around and start creating the shape. Before I knew it, I had all of the pieces cut out. I could then go and test them on the subframe assembly to see if I need to do any final trimming before I can get to the stage where I can tack it all together. But before I do that, I'm going to mark out the holes where I want to make the bolts that go into the subframe. I do the same to the near side. I lay it all up, get the pieces in place, and then mark out where the bolts are going to go into the frame. Once I'm happy with those, I can remove the brackets and then put them in the vise to start some pilot holes. Once I've got the holes drilled into those pieces, I can then transfer them back to the subframe and mark them out on there. To do this, I simply use a vice clamp to hold it in place, and then carefully, as I drill around the 3 holes, and make sure to check it doesn't move when I move from each position. I'm now back in the audio game. This morning I went to the dentist and half my face was numbed, so I was going to sort of talk like that. Now I'm back though. We will continue with the subframe, and I have a 16mm drill bit to bore out these so I can insert some nuts into this frame. The method I'm using now is going to be by far the easiest way to get these plates bolted to the subframe. The fact that the frame is quite thin, I can't bolt up through the bottom or all the way down through. I need to weld in captive nuts, and not only that, I need to make sure the bolts are just thick enough to go through the amount of threads I need to make it nice and strong, but to not go too far as to foul anything else. Once again, I'm happy with the progress, so I do exactly the same on the near side. Two in a row. I've got to the point where I've drilled out all 6 holes as much as I can with a 16mm drill bit. However, they're not as deep as I'd like, so I'm going to have to modify these nuts before I get them welded in. I'll show you what I'm talking about now. I've now drilled them all out to 16mm. However, due to the fact I'm going down through some of the reinforcement plates that's in the middle of this plate, I've come to a dead stop and it's hard to drill out nicely. So to counter that, I have tapered off some nuts that I'm going to weld in to it, and then I can simply get them flush then, like so. We're moving along nicely now. As we're ready for welding, it's time to clean this up a bit and get it outside so we can get these captive nuts in. Before I even think about starting to weld, I need to clean up the area that I'm welding. Over the last few months since this part has been on the car, it seems to have gathered a bit of oil and debris. Soon enough, however, I get the first nut to weld in place. I thread the nut into a long bolt so I can hold it straight and vertical. This helps me put it in a rough position. As I weld it together, I need to make sure I don't get too close to the bolt. I can't be welding that on too. That needs to come back out. Now the 3 are welded in on the near side, I can move on to the off side. I quickly get the first one welded in. By this point, the bolt that I'm using to hold them in place is getting rather warm, so it's a bit of a challenge to just sort of hold it quick enough before I burn my hand and get it tacked on. Either way, it certainly makes you work fast. With it all welded up now, I need to clean off the welds on the top. I start with a grinding disc, just taking off any weld that's too raised. This should allow the plate to bolt down nice and flat. I forgot to drill out the plates that I'm going to bolt to the subframe to the right size, so I draw my attention to those so we can get them test fitted. All the nuts are welded into the subframe. I've drilled out these plates just oversized, so they're slightly bigger than 8mm. Let's see if they fit. That's one in. The second one's not quite right. Neither is the third one. I'm going to oversize them a bit more, just so I have a bit more clearance on the 3 holes. Alright, let's go again. Now with oversized holes, it's looking much better. One side. The near side didn't need any modifications at all. It was good the first time. I've cut the threads down to about 10mm of thread on these bolts, so I can do them up tight. In order to mock these brackets up properly, it's critical to make sure they are bolted up completely tight. I need to get an accurate clamping force on these mounts for it to work properly. I'm not going to rush it at this point. I was concerned the final bolt was going to bottom out, so I just put a washer on it. I do have a small confession to make. When I was cleaning up the area around the nuts that I've welded into the subframe, I completely forgot about the 2 reference marks that are on the mounts themselves. I should be able to work out where they go, because I made these plates in line with the reference marks that are on the mounts. I now have the task of getting these mounts back in, then getting the rest of the metal all in place, and then I can tack it together, unbolt these bolts, pull it off, fully weld it up, then test fit it again. I don't want to melt the mounts. I'm happy everything's trimmed now, it's all ready for tacking on. However, I do want to be able to clamp these brackets tight down onto the mount. Therefore, I'm going to take the base plates off again, put a thin washer underneath the plate, bolt it back down tight, tack it together, and then when it comes to fitting it, it will just put a bit of pressure on these bushes, as I don't want them to move around in the seat. Once I'd found 6 washers and the right thickness, I could get the plates back on. The washer's now in. Let's get everything tacked together. I start on the offside. Crucially, I need to put the small C-shaped plate that goes on the top of the mount in the right position. This is the one that could contact the bracket that comes off the engine if I get it wrong. It's very important for this bit to not go over the lines that I've already drawn on the mount. Before I did any tacks, I made sure the piece of metal that goes around the mount was completely flush, and there was no gap between the bottom plate and that. In order for these brackets to hold the mount down, they need to be quite tight. I'm just doing very light tacks at this point. I don't want to damage the polyurethane. At one point I need to exert a bit of pressure to get the plate down in place, and once I tacked that particular bit on, the mount decided to set fire. I momentarily panicked and then just decided to blow on it to cool it down. Not wanting any more fire damage, I get the Allen key I need to remove this bracket, and then I move on to the other side. Exactly the same procedure, I just take my time, carrying out light tacks, making sure there are no gaps and it's all flush. I was ready this time with the Allen key, so as soon as I got those last welds on, I quickly whipped it off so it doesn't cause any damage to the mount. Once I'd got the flammable plastic out the way with the subframe, I could then fully weld up these brackets. These 2 are welded up now. It goes without saying I need to let them cool down before I can test fit them. In the meantime, I'll show you something I noticed. Yeah, it's seesawing currently. I've taken all the weight off of the engine, and you see the amount of stuff I have in the back. It's a little counterbalanced, so I need to be wary when I'm working on the car as not to knock it off the stands at the front. What did arrive is my hub puller set. So we can have a look at this while we wait for those parts to cool down. These look pretty cool actually. Look at that, slide hammer. I guess we need to see if this fits on the Z4 and the M3 hubs. It's quite a cool little hydraulic system we have here. This puller and press tool was advertised as a Volkswagen and Audi Group specific tool, but in my mind, as long as it goes wide enough and is a 5 stud, it should fit fine. Almost looks like a center lock wheel nut adapter. See, I told you it would fit. Let's see what we can do. I made sure the bolts were done up tight, then I wind the press body all the way in until it comes to a dead stop on the end of the drive shaft. Once I've done that, I can start winding the press in and then hopefully crack it free. I've wound it on as far as I can by hand, so there's a decent amount of pressure on there now. It's going to sit under pressure for a bit. I just have used a hammer and some wood just to knock the CV joint, see if I can free it up anymore, but at the moment it's still not budging. This thing is proving a real challenge. After I hit the joint a bit with a piece of wood, it did actually free it up a little bit, so maybe there is some hope. No. Don't believe it has moved yet. Let's keep trying. You know what that noise means? I think we've broken the back on this. We may finally be able to free some drive shafts. The way this tool works, the press has less than an inch of travel. So every time you wind it all the way in, you need to then wind it back out, wind the body in until it contacts the end of the shaft again, and then start again. It's quite good actually, it's not too much extra work. Yeah, buddy. Well, it's still in there, but it's basically pressed out. At least I know the concept works. Awesome. I did damage the mount a little bit when I was tacking it together. You see the corners just melted slightly. Not enough to cause a problem though. I place the mount back in its seat, fits my freshly made brackets on top of the mount, then bolt it down tight. Well, that's 1 out of 2. There's a really nice amount of bite on the mount, so that washer theory works well. Held in there nicely. I move on to the other side and it doesn't seem like there's too many issues there either. That's good, they're both on, they're nice and tight, so I don't have to worry about the engine falling out the bay when spirited driving. However, it's not done yet. We still need to make the stud that's going to go on the side of this mount to stop the bushes from twisting around on themselves. I'm also going to reduce some of the weight off these mounts to make them look a bit nicer, and I'm going to cut a bit off like that. You may have been wondering why I'd left the mounts looking a little janky. I always had in mind I needed to trim off the edges. I just didn't know at the time how much material I wanted, so it's a tactical move. But now I know the concept works, I can remove as much weight as I think I can without losing any strength. Based on the fact that I can just do that, I think it's a good idea now to get the subframe back on the engine, get it bolted down, and at least the car's a bit more balanced. I'm going to resist doing the final step to this by putting the locating pin in the side to stop them twisting. I think it's a good idea. Sensible option is to get it on the car. Make sure it's 100% square again, and then I can mark it up and do that at a future date. I attempt to get this subframe bolted back up from one side. I did feel a bit vulnerable down there, to be honest, because at the moment I know the car has a tendency to do wheelies. Oh dear. It's got a bit going on. Listen to me with the excuses. Come on, you can get this on. Oh boy. Oh, the car's moving. I decided to create a bit of space at the front of the engine so I could change my position and try again. I think if I can support one side with my knee and the other side with my arms, I'll have a fighting chance. It's a little trickier now as I have the mounts already in place, so I need to guide those up into the engine brackets, as well as locating the bolts through the subframe into the chassis legs. Eventually we get there. I've managed to get the subframe back on. Now let's see if my new brackets will bolt on in situ. It's going to be a little tricky, but I'm sure it is possible. Now I'm really hoping they work. I don't want to have to take it all off and start again. I move up to attack it from the top to see if I can see if the bolts are aligning properly. I think it's looking good. It now just needs a final nip up from underneath and it should be on. Sweet. Looking good. And look how pretty that is. It couldn't have gone much better. The engine is now fully on the mounts again, the jacks come down, and I am very happy with the way this turned out. It's quite a nice and simple, thought out way of getting around the fact that I don't have space to bolt the mount from underneath because of the clearance on the lower arm. I know it looks like it's a lot of work and faff for what I've done just for the engine mounts, but because of the space in the chassis, I don't think there's any other way. And yeah, to me, that's a nice solution. Awesome, let's move on. I think we should press on with the hubs, no pun intended. I'm going to fully remove all of the drive shafts and then we can start mocking up, fabricating the rear end again. So if you remember, not long ago, I used the tool to press it the majority of the way through the hub. Now I just need to fully remove it. I'm only going to believe it when I see this shaft pop out the other side. This one's putting up a fight until the very end. Amazingly, the pressure hasn't changed the whole way along the splines, so it really must have been rusted in there. Oh baby! Woo-wee! Gee whiz! Yeah, all of those splines are pretty well rusted. But hey ho, 1 down and 3 to go. Going for the other M3 hub now. Now I've got one out, there's no excuses, we just have to press and crack on. Hopefully both. Way. There we go. Ooh. Have some of that. Two down, 2 to go. I had no issues fitting the hub adapter to the Z4 ones, and the fact they're a bit smaller than the M3 ones. I'm hoping they'll come off easy, but I've said that before, and it's not been the case. I may have broken this press already. It just stopped working, to be honest, but for now I'm just going to try and wind it in manually. Leave it under pressure for a bit. Things are getting a bit crazy. I've already damaged something else now, so I'm going to try a different tool I have in that kit. For whatever reason, the press just decided to give up the ghost, so I'm going to use the manual one like I said. Yeah, it's not supposed to look like that. That was straight. Once the hub adapter is bolted up tight, I can thread the centre housing in that holds the threaded bar, then I can do the bar up with a rattle gun. The shock from that didn't budge it, so then it's time to get the pry bar out. Oh, bugger. That is tight. I'm hoping I don't damage the end of the drive shaft too much. There is a point on the end of the threaded bar. It is designed that way so it can grip it, and there's less surface area to turn, so there's less resistance as you're trying to press it off. Either way, we're going to find out. I'll get the breaker bar on it and just send it. We'll see. I'm actually damaging the tooling that bolts onto the hub. I have just started having a go at the other Z4 one, and it appears we could be in luck. In luck indeed. I could feel straight away as soon as I started undoing it, it was already pulling out of the hub. For whatever reason, this one was a lot looser. I'm not complaining. This is going to be 3 out of 4. At a certain point, it even got loose enough to down the pry bar, get a ratchet on it. What a luxury. Come on, come on. Yay! First Z4 shaft is free. Look how blooming rusty that is. Why? Why? Come on, one more to go. We can do this. Ah, yes! Yes! Surely that's going to come now. Progress is had. Yeah. Once I heard that one crack, it was a big sigh of relief. I didn't want to have to come in the next day and tackle it again. only just gone and done it. 4 shafts removed, minimal damage, lots of rust. Luminac. What a journey that was. Got 4 drive shafts. Hopefully we can make 2 good ones to go on that car. It's a perfect time to end this episode. If you've enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, comments about the build, any advice, much appreciated, drop it down below. Go subscribe and I'll see you very, very soon. What a beast of a machine this was. Can't beat a manual.